Well, it's not surprising that the United States would be conducting spying operations from the sea, naval espionage operations against Russia. In fact, it would be surprising if the U.S. was not doing that, given the current world situation. Russia has become increasingly assertive in more recent times, and the United States certainly regards this as a threat. Of course, there's the issue with the Ukraine and the Russian involvement in Crimea, and then the Russians have also been accusing the United States of interfering in the Ukraine as well, which is most likely true. We have to keep in mind that the U.S. has attempted to engineer all of these color-coded revolutions in recent years in different parts of the world, in particular in Eastern Europe. So it's quite likely that the United States is involved extensively in various covert actions in the Ukraine, and that the Russians are no doubt aware of this. Now, as for the naval espionage operations, we also have to keep in mind that the United States is likely very concerned about Russian involvement in the various conflicts that are going on in the Middle East at present. In particular, I suspect that the United States is concerned about Russia becoming involved in the war in Syria on behalf of the Assad regime. Remember that the Russians lended support to the Assad regime previously when President Obama was considering military action against the Assad regime in Syria. And there's a fairly extensive history behind all of this. Ever since the middle part of the 20th century, the United States' primary objective, geopolitical objective in the Middle East has been to prevent the rise of any kind of Arab nationalism or any kind of autonomous nationalism among Middle Eastern nations. Back during the 1950s and 1960s and 1970s, the main thing that the United States was worried about were movements that were influenced by leaders like Nasser in Egypt, and the idea there was the United States was especially opposed to Arab nationalism that would have the impact of charting an independent course in Arab nations and in Middle Eastern nations as well. And it's for that reason, in part, that the United States has always offered a tacit or a covert support to Islamic fundamentalism of the kind that we see emanating from Saudi Arabia. The kinds of Sunni extremism that we've seen emerge in the Middle East in recent decades has its roots in the Wahhabist interpretation of Islam that largely comes out of Saudi Arabia, and it's the royal families and the Gulf monarchs who fund a great deal of that, because they use that as a weapon against Arab nationalism, which is opposed to the fact that many of the Gulf monarchies are puppet states of the United States. And the issue with Russia, how that relates to Russia, is that Russia was always something of a benefactor to Arab nationalism. That was particularly true during the Soviet period, when a number of secular Arab nationalist movements became clients of the Soviet Union. And I think the United States is concerned about a repeat of that, where we would start to see the rise of movements in the Middle East that are, on one hand, anti-American, anti-Israel, and against the Saudis and the elites of the Gulf states, but are secular and are perhaps aligned with the Eastern nations, particularly Russia. Also, as far as the United States espionage operations generally, we have to keep in mind that the United States conducts espionage even against nations that are supposed allies. During the revelations that came out during the Edward Snowden affair, it was revealed that the United States National Security Agency had actually been tapping Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany's telephone, and just a few months ago it was revealed that the United States was conducting similar espionage operations against China, very similar to what is being said now as far as potential naval espionage against Russia. So it's not surprising at all that this is happening and that this is coming out. And I suspect that that is the primary motive for it. The primary motive that the United States has is the fact that Russia is somewhat resurgent, is becoming increasingly assertive, has asserted itself in the Ukraine, and I think in particular the United States is worried about Russian intervention in Syria on behalf of Assad and supporting secular Arab nationalism in the Middle East generally.